In the intelligence and special operations community, a Rolex is often mentioned as a tool for escape and evasion, serving as a recognizable item of value that can be traded for a ride to the nearest border or a seat on the last plane out of a war-torn country in an emergency. But has a Rolex ever actually been used for this purpose? Or is this simply a myth, a tall tale told over beers? In this video, we explore trading a Rolex to get out of a sticky situation. Watches of Espionage is curated by a former CIA case officer with a passion for timepieces. On the WWII YouTube channel, we explore the myths and realities of the intersection of watches and the military, intelligence, and national security. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be informed when we release new videos. The final requirement to be certified as a CIA case officer is to pass the certification course at a classified government training center, commonly referred to as the farm. Students learn the tradecraft to clandestinely recruit and handle assets. The atmosphere at the farm is somewhere between a college campus with a constant stream of students riding by on cruiser bikes, a covert paramilitary base with state-of-the-art tactical facilities, and Hogwarts, a place where you learn the dark arts they don't teach in regular school. Like most government training programs, the curriculum is divided between classroom lecture and discussion sessions, combined with significant role-playing and practical applications. The third and largely unofficial pillar of the training is informal mentoring from the instructors and independent contractors, all of whom are former case officers with significant real-world experience. True to the stereotype, much of these conversations happen over beers at the facility's notorious watering hole after long days of training. One night after a surveillance detection evolution, our small group was sitting in that dimly lit bar, nursing our drinks as we listened to a grizzled, old Africa Division CO regale stories of his decades on the continent during the Cold War. It was late. The evening was wrapping up and the bartender rang the bell for last call. Suddenly, the instructor stood up and tapped a Rolex GMT Master on his wrist. "I will leave you with one point. Always wear a Rolex." A fellow case officer traded his for the last seat on a plane out of during the Civil War in the 70s, and that watch saved his life. A story for another time. The moment quickly passed, like many others during that 6-month period that I have long forgotten. I never heard the full story. I still don't know if it was true or just typical bravado from a crusty old CO who never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Visit any internet watch forum or social media page on military watches, and you are bound to see someone claim they know someone who was an operator who wore a Rolex to barter their way out of a bad situation. But have watches ever really been used for this purpose? I know many people, myself included, who wore a luxury timepiece while operational in the CIA and in the special operations community. We have documented many of them on Watches of Espionage in the past. While the main purpose of the watch was not for escape and evasion, that was always an option and a contingency plan if needed. The concept is simple. Should you find yourself in need of immediate help, the watch can be utilized as a form of currency that can be traded for a few hours of shelter in a basement, a ride to the nearest international border, or a seat on the next plane out of a war-torn nation. A Rolex is easier to carry and less likely to be misplaced than ounces of gold or stacks of $100 bills. CIA finance officers will not reimburse a personal watch if used for this purpose, but ultimately it was a financial risk I was willing to take in my overseas operations. Bottom line up front, we have never heard a confirmed story of a CIA officer using a timepiece in this manner. But that's not to say it's a total fallacy. There are indeed some historical examples of timepieces being used, or at least intended, for this very purpose. In fact, some special operations units, including the British Special Air Service, or SAS, have gone so far as to commission Rolex unit watches. Starting with an example from World War II, the U.S. Navy issued pilots escape and evasion, or E&E barter kits, in the event of a crash. This one, which is likely from the late 1950s or 1960s, was a sealed black rubber kit containing 2 gold rings, a gold chain and pendant, and a Milas Snowstar watch on a cloth strap. The general idea was that if an aircraft was downed in enemy or even friendly territory, the items could be traded with locals to aid in an escape. Obviously, a Milas Snowstar isn't a Rolex, but the concept is the same. These kits were mostly issued in the Pacific theaters of World War II, Vietnam, and the Korean War. Although it is unclear whether they were actually leveraged for their intended purpose in a real-life scenario. There is significant documentation that Special Forces, Navy SEALs, and CIA officers wore Rolex, Tudor, Seiko, and other timepieces throughout the conflict in Southeast Asia. While some of these watches were issued for their primary purpose, to tell time, they could also be purchased tax-free at the Post Exchange, or PX, for around a month's salary, anywhere from $150 to $250, which is a couple of thousand of today's dollars. While former MACV-SOG legend John Stryker-Meyer, or Till to those that know him, told WWII that many of his comrades purchased Rolex watches that were to be used as a potential bartering tool during escape and evasion, we have not yet seen documented examples of watches actually used for this purpose. On May 1, 1960, USAF pilot Francis Gary Powers was shot down while flying a reconnaissance mission in Soviet airspace, causing the infamous 1960 U-2 incident that had significant diplomatic implications during the height of the Cold War. Powers carried an E&E kit containing maps, a compass, gold coins, Soviet rubles, and 4 gold watches. Of course, Powers was immediately apprehended and was unable to utilize the watches for their intended purpose. He spent 1 year, 9 months, and 10 days as a prisoner of the USSR before being released. In June 1995, Air Force Captain Scott O'Grady's F-16 was shot down by a Serb-controlled 2K-12 Cub mobile surface-to-air missile while flying a routine combat air patrol. In one of the few modern documented examples of E&E in hostile territory, O'Grady spent 6 days evading capture before his rescue by U.S. Marines. Like many pilots, O'Grady wore a Pepsi Rolex GMT Master on his wrist, a gift from his father. However, O'Grady did not view the watch as a tool for escape, but as a motivation to push him to return home. O'Grady would later recall, "I knew what would happen if I was captured. The Rolex would be gone in a wink, a nice little war souvenir for somebody. I was determined that would never happen. Nobody was going to capture me." During the chaotic days following Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Andrew Smeaton, the CISO of Data Robot, reportedly traveled to Ukraine to assist with the evacuation of one of his employees. When he arrived in Poland, he found it was difficult to rent a car to drive into Ukraine. So he reportedly traded his Breitling for a 15-year-old Toyota that was low on oil and needed duct tape to keep the hood in place. The rest is history. Smeaton was able to drive the car into the war zone and make contact with his employee for a safe return. Smeaton would later recall, "It's never like the movies, right? There's no James Bond. There's no Aston Martin." So what's the verdict? Has a timepiece been used to barter for someone's escape from a war zone or bad situation? Unfortunately, I've lost contact with that crusty old case officer, and despite my years serving on the continent, I was never able to confirm the story as fact or myth. Like many great espionage stories, we must leave this question unanswered for now. Our exploration of watches of espionage is still in its infancy, and we would not be surprised to learn of a story where a Rolex or other high-end timepiece was used by a case officer or spec ops operator to get out of a jam. If you have heard of this happening, drop a comment down below. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, drop a comment, and hit the bell icon to be informed when we release new videos. For even more, check out our website, watchesofespionage.com, for more content, as well as our collection of watch straps and other purpose-built tools designed for our community. Until next time, happy hunting.